The yard stank of smoke, wet wool, and fear. The pyre was an ugly thing. Green wood that hissed and spat, damp straw matted with slush, a gallows of fire waiting for a man who had once worn black. Wind came down off the wall like a blade. The sound it made was a thin edge along stone. The same sound the old bear's raven had made when it scolded him for leaving a cup unwashed in better days. John could not stop looking at Mance Rayder. Even bound, even bruised, the man stood as if the ropes were a belt and no more, as if he would begin to sing if someone thrust a harp into his hands. "You will kneel," Stannis Baratheon said from his place near the pyre, cold voice in the cold air, "or you will burn." Mance's smile was not a kind one, though it did not look cruel either. It was a smile a man gives to a song he will never again hear. "If your god is fond of smoke, let him swallow it," he said. "I've seen enough burning. If you are so set on the thing, do it clean. Steel for a man, not fire." Melisandre's red hair spilled from beneath her hood like the heart of the flame that had not yet been lit. "The Lord of Light asks not what is pleasing," she murmured, "only what is true. True kings have true blood. In fire, truth is seen. It is also seen in the ground when it drinks a man," Mance said, and then he turned his head and found John. "You were better with a harp than I remember that now. Do you sing for kings, Snow?" "I'm a brother of the Night's Watch," John said. The words were frost in his mouth. He knew what Stannis would say, could hear the king's flat reply before it was given voice. "Came anyway. And you are a subject of your king," Stannis said. "Stand aside, Snow." The ropes creaked as Mance shifted. He lifted his chin. His hair was graying. Some of it had been singed in the battle for the wall when the oil caught and the world tried to become a torch. His eyes were bright. "Let me die with a sword in my hand." "Mercy is the gift of a just king," Stannis said. "I am just, but I am not a fool. You would not live the space of a breath if steel was given you." "Give him a sword," John heard himself say, and when the king's head turned, when every face turned, he felt the hard click of fate like a trigger resetting. "What did you say?" Stannis asked. The words were already out, and they led to a road with no turning. "Give him a sword," John said again, steady this time. "If he dies as he asks. If he lives." He let the wind swallow the rest. The word "if" hovered in the air like breath in winter, visible and fragile. Melisandre watched him as one might watch a spark on a piece of tinder, eyes narrowed against the wind. "You would make a show of blood, Lord Snow?" she asked softly. "In the sight of gods?" "There's no show in killing a bound man," John said. "That's not justice. That's a lesson, and not the sort worth teaching." He looked at Mance. "I will be your steel." A murmur stirred around them. Black cloaks and rough furs and bright, lacquered mail rubbing together like wet bark. Tormund Giantsbane barked a laugh that had no mirth in it. "Ho," he said. "Crow wants to dance with the king beyond the wall. You've a good blade, boy, but a blade's no good without the wrist to use it." "What are your terms?" Stannis asked, clipped. The corner of his mouth twitched, but not from humor. It might have been outrage. It might have been calculation. Trial by combat is a right under the laws of men. The gods have their fire. The king has his law. "The law is the law," the queen murmured from behind him. Chapped lips pressed tight, eyes like chips of salt. Celis' cheeks were red with cold and zeal where they peered out of her fur hood. Shireen watched from a step behind, her face pale beneath its patchwork of scars. "My terms," John said, and surprised himself again. "If I win, the free folk submit to the king's terms. They come through the wall in peace, lay down their arms at the gates, and are let south by the order the Night's Watch deems fit. Those that won't bend go back into the wilderness and take their chances with winter. No burning." He lifted his voice so all could hear. "No more burning." "And if you lose?" Stannis asked. John looked at Mance. The wildling king smiled again, slow, as if the notion warmed him. "If I lose," John said, and let the words fall clean, "I die. That's answer enough." "You speak as if you have a right to bargain for the king," Melisandre said. "I speak as a man who must live with what is done here," Jon replied. Stannis stared at Jon for a long beat that felt like a held breath in the dark. The wind worried the king's banner until the stag snapped and fluttered like a living animal trying to break its pole. When the king finally nodded, the sound, bone scraping on bone, seemed to cross the yard. "Very well," Stannis said. "Let there be combat. It was never my wish to burn a man who asks for a sword. That was a lie, or perhaps it was the truth on one narrow line. Kings told truths that fit the width of their crowns." The ropes came off Mance. He rolled his shoulders and flexed his fingers as if shaking sleep from them. Mance's wrists were raw and chafed. "You've a long blade," he said when Longclaw was drawn and the dark ripples of Valyrian steel drank the light. "I wore black once." The stores on the wall held fewer wonders then. Someone fetched him a sword, one of the free folk's hacksaws of iron and bone. It fit his hand like an old song. They faced each other on slush and straw. The brothers dragged the half-built pyre back to make space. Men made a ring without being told, and within it the world narrowed until there were only 2 breaths and the whisper of leather and the phantom heat of a fire that had not been lit. "Better a blade than blaze," Mance said. "On your feet, then snow." The first exchange was testing. Iron on dark, quick and clean. Jon's wrist remembered the weight. He felt the high tower's yard beneath H. His feet and Rory's wooden blade thwacking like a scolding. And when Mance fainted high and kicked slush into his face, Jon remembered Alliser Thorne's laughter and kept his guard. Old trainings were shelves in the mind. You took down a book and the words came back. Mance did not fight like a king. He fought like a man who had led rangers across frost and pine and had learned how men died from all the places their blood could run out. He fought like a man who remembered what the wall felt like beneath his fingers at midnight. Jon moved his feet. Ser Roderick had hammered it into him, and Corran Halfhand had etched it deeper. Never forget your feet. Longclaw met the wildling blade and took a chip out of it. The sound was wrong, iron crying like a beast. Mance's mouth tightened. He did not fear Jon's steel. He feared what it meant if he died by it. There was no music in Valyrian steel. It was a silence so complete it ate songs. "Good," Mance breathed, sweat already freezing on his temple. "Better than I thought. You're your father's son there." He threw a cut Jon had not thought he would choose, low then high, a trick that would take a man's eye if he blinked. Jon blinked. The iron kissed his cheekbone and cut a line that stung in the cold, and the blood ran hot for a breath and then it did not run at all. He tasted copper. Mance grunted. Jon saw the humor in his eyes and the grief and the pride. That was what the world was at the end. A handful of plain things you could carry with you. The ring of men saw the fight as a thing separate from themselves, but it was not. Jon felt the weight of all of them. Tormund's heartbeat, the Northman's scorn, Queen Celis' disgust, the king's poor patience, Melisandre's attention like a hand on his shoulder, the way the wall behind him watched like a white god without pity. He heard the baby cry from somewhere, a thin noise that sliced him open beneath his ribs. Mance's child. Dalla was gone to where all warm things went when winter had its way. If Jon failed, the boy would be a spark snuffed under a heel. If Jon prevailed and forgot mercy, the boy might yet be snuffed by a holier heel. He advanced then because mercy without strength was nothing. The iron blade took another chip. Mance cursed softly, a ranger's curse. He was tired. He was too proud to show it. Jon set a rhythm: shoulder, hip, wrist, foot. Give, take, give, and then take, and Mance fell half a beat behind. It was like working a stubborn lock. You did not force it, you listened. When the door gave, it did so suddenly. Mance slipped. His heel found straw instead of slush, and the straw slid like oil. His knee went down and his sword came up. That was the moment. Jon could see the alternative life in the space of a blink. The blade goes to Mance's throat and stops. Jon offers peace like a hand extended. And after, someone lights a torch anyway. After, someone else's hand tightens when a child is taken for a god's meal. After, more burning, and Jon, having been kind, becomes what he hates. A witness who did not cut the cord at the right time because the knife felt too sharp. The choice was cruel because the world was, and the work of men was not to make it kind in one stroke, but to keep it from growing crueler around the edges. Longclaw came down. The sword bit. Valyrian steel does not sing. The sigh it gave was an old one. Mance tried to push up into it, and then he did not. Jon took one step back because he needed to breathe and could not find the air where he had been standing. Mance did not look surprised. That was the worst of it. He took the wound as a thief takes a lash, winces, accepts, pockets the bright coin of pain for later. "Good," he said again, and the word was more breath than sound. He put his free hand to his throat and it came away red. He looked at the red like a man guessing the weather from a cloud. His eyes climbed Jon and went over his shoulder to the wall. "Do what's right then," he said. The wildling king could have begged. He could have cursed. He did neither. "I won't burn." That was all he had asked for and all he would get. He folded like a tent when the wind dies. The ground took him, and the red spread away from him, a flower in slush. No one cheered. Even the wind shut up. Tormund's mouth was a grave. He put 2 fingers to his lips and pressed them. Val stood with the baby swaddled under her cloak, her hair unbound so that snow caught in it and clung like pearls. Her eyes found Jon and held there. It was not hate he saw. It was something harder. He preferred hate. Stannis inclined his head, which was what a king did in place of useful thanks. The muscles in his jaw worked once. "So be it," he said, and to the ring of men, "You heard the terms. Lay down your arms and live. Keep them, and die north of the wall when the cold comes howling." He made a sign with his hand, and the pyre builders began to dismantle their work for kindling and cook fires. Melisandre watched the dead man with a lover's focus and then lifted her gaze to Jon. If there was disappointment in her, it was for the gossip of the flames that would never be. "You chose steel," she said, coming to him with her cloak whispering along the ground. "I chose not to be a butcher," Jon said. His cheek burned where Mance's iron had kissed him. "And I chose to make you choose too." She smiled then. "You think I would not have loved the lesson of smoke? But we read now a different page. Some end with a dot of ink, Lord Snow. Some end with a blade." She looked past him at Val and the child. "There are other ways. King's blood does not only flow from a throat." He had to step in then because he could not abide the taste of where that went. "No burning," he said again, to Stannis this time. "That was the term." "Indeed," Stannis said. It was both concession and rebuke, and his pale eyes said clearly, "I will find a road around your stones, boy. But blood drawn by the leech is blood too. You'll not see my chance at the throne thrown on a rubbish heap because you loved a wildling's pride." "Leave him," Jon said. He knelt beside Mance. The heat was already leaving the body, heat the world could ill afford to lose, and Jon felt the loss like a wintered child watching his last coal turn to ash. "I will see him buried. You will see him burned," Melisandre said, almost gentle now, and he looked up sharply. She lifted both hands to show their emptiness. "For the dead, not for the living. Your gods and mine agree on that small wisdom. Without fire, corpses rise again, hungry for heat they no longer own." Tormund knelt opposite Jon without being asked, all careless bigness gone. He did not shed a tear. He took his knife and cut a lock of Mance's hair and folded it into his fist. "You cut him clean," he said in a tone that was not compliment or condemnation. It was a simple ledger entry. He asked for clean. You gave what was asked. "I will answer for it," Jon said. Tormund said. "We all answer. Some sooner." The dead king burned that night on a small pyre. No pomp, no lesson. A quick flame that the wind worried to embers and then ash. Men stood and watched who had hated him in life and called him a thief and a raider. And those same men made the sign of a prayer when the fire ate him because old habits were stubborn. And death has a way of rubbing out the edges of grudges. Val did not weep. She held the child and looked into the fire the way a huntress reads a trail. She did not come to Jon until the last flame spit and sighed and died. "You were cruel," she said quietly. He took the words and did not try to duck them. "I was. You were kind, she said, and that he did not know where to put. Her mouth quirked. A small kindness, but a big one to us. She touched the dried line on his cheek with 2 fingers. He cut you. He was supposed to, John said. It would have been wrong if he hadn't marked me at all. Wrong, Val asked. Unbalanced, he amended. Like a story too easy to believe. That is all we've had, she said. Hard stories. She shifted the child, who had gone quiet as if he'd listened and found nothing in the talk worth crying about. He asked one thing: to die like a man. You're a man who heard it. For that, I won't curse you beneath my breath when I wake. Her eyes moved past him, to where Melisandre stood, like a shadow cast by a good fire. She will come for him, not his bones, his blood. Even dead, a king's seed has a way of making men foolish. He's no one's king now, John said. In the south they like crowns, Val said. In the north we like names. They'll say king's blood because it tastes better in your mouth than boy's blood. She looked at the child and then at John. What will you do? I will keep the term I gave, John said. No burning. If you can, Val said. She smiled, and it was like the first clean drink after a long march. Unexpected and making you thirstier for having been tasted. You killed our king. Now keep your promises, Crow. Or I will find a way into your hall on some dark night and cut hair from your head for a rope. If you wish to make a rope of my hair, John said, finding his own sore humor, you'll be short of line. Her laughter was like flint. When he slept that night, he dreamed of stone corridors and warm bread and a woman whose face he could not hold, red hair and then brown and then snow bright, and he woke with the sense that a door had been shut somewhere. He had shut it. At first light he went to the king. Your Grace, he said, if I am to keep my term, the free folk must be let through the gates under watch. We will disarm them at the wall. We will move them south to abandoned holds and villages. We will take hostages to keep the peace on both sides. We will separate the worst of them from the ones who only want not to starve. We must use them where we can. Men that can hunt become hunters. Men that can cut would become woodcutters. Women and children will be allotted as they can be kept without hunger. We will not have them in the Shadow Tower's way or Eastwatches. The ground along the new gift is poor, but it can be turned. We will need seed and tools. You will need a king's blessing, Stannis said. I have that already, John said, and watched the king's eyes tighten. It was a dangerous thing to say, but he had said it. You gave it in the yard when you nodded. Stannis let the silence hang long enough to dress the room in frost. You are bold, he said. If you were my man, I would whip you for the tone you take. But you are not my man. You are your own, bound by oath to black brothers who take no king. It is a strange house, this house of vows. When I knock, you answer with words. When I ask for bread, you hand me a law. Yet I need the wall more than I need my pride. Very well. Feed them. Disarm them. Hold them apart. And if one wildling knifes one of my men, I will take a hand for a hand and a head for a head. And if one of your men knifes one of mine? John asked. It won him a thin, inward smile, an eclipse across Stannis's mouth. I will take a hand for a hand and a head for a head, the king said again. I am not my brother. I do not ask for a man's love. I ask for his work. Do yours. He lifted a hand as if to brush aside a fly. I am told there will be a choosing for your Lord Commander before the week is done. Win it. I don't want it, John said without thinking, and Stannis's head cocked, hawk fierce. Your wants are not the measure of the thing, he said. You do not want Winterfell either, and yet you would make a better lord of it than most men now living. Want is wind. The wall needs stone. His eyes flicked briefly to the red woman near the hearth. You are stubborn in the wrong places and weak in the right ones. It makes you useful. Take the command, Snow, or I will have it put in a man's hands who loves me more than he loves the night. What will he do then when Why need and your vows rub raw? You can guess. Win the vote. John left and went out to air colder than kings. The gatehouse was a black mouth. He stood there and watched the morning trickle through it. Wildlings in pairs and threes, hands empty, furs stiff with frost. The weapons they surrendered piled in heaps like severed tails. Bone knives, stone axes, iron swords red with rust and history. He set men he trusted to count and carry, and men he didn't to watch the men he trusted. He set Dolorous Ed to stand with that slow way he had and make notes on a scrap of parchment with fingers gone red from ink. One weg, one dar, one bent his great head to pass beneath the archway, and 100 men stepped back as one. The giant's hair was frosted white, his eyes the blue of deep water. "Friend," he rumbled, very soft, when John made the sign of welcome they had agreed upon. "Friend," John said, loud enough so the 100 would hear, and one small fear slid out of the yard on its belly like a snake. The day stretched long. At dusk he found Val on the wall walk with the child under her cloak. She had no gloves. Her fingers were red where they clutched the fur. "It was quick," she said, looking north. The wind lifted her hair and flattened it. "We give up our knives at your gate like lambs, but we do it. You feed us, you say. We'll see." "We will," John said. He wanted to say more, but what he wanted to say was that none of this was certain and everything could still be lost, and in the face of that only stubbornness looked like wisdom, and he had no song that would make stubbornness sweet. "I will do what I can with what we have." "Good," she said, and offered him the child for a moment. John took him awkwardly, certain he would drop him, certain he was not made for this sort of weight. The boy opened his eyes as if he had been pretending sleep and studying John in secret. They were brown, not the hard blue of the others, and the sight of that little common color made something inside him unclench. "He'll need a name," Val said. "A new one, if your flaming woman knows how to read meaning out of letters." John did not look at Melisandre's tower. "Let someone who loves him name him," he said. "A name will stick longer than a spell." "Someone who loves him," Val repeated, a dry echo, and took the boy back when his arms began to ache. "Guard your words as you do your gates, Crow. There are queens always listening." The choosing came and went like a winter storm that had been brewing beyond the trees for days. A lightless pressure, little flurries of hope and spite, the sensation of something heavy arriving and the sudden release when it has passed, leaving everything changed by inches. Sam's freckled face was pale with the effort of it. The old commanders, Cotter Pike from Eastwatch with his dockyard hands and his salt tongue, Dennis Mallister from the Shadow Tower with his gentle manners and his knighthood old as oaks, had their friends and enemies, and John had a little of both. In the end, it was Sam's quiet work that broke it open. Men who did not know they could be swayed found themselves nodding, and men who thought themselves neutral discovered they had been moved. When John's name was spoken aloud as Victor, a murmur went through the hall like the creak of a ship's ribs. Bowen Marsh pressed his lips into a pale line. Alistair Thorne offered a bow and an insult in one, the angle of his neck like a finger flick that had missed its mark. Ed rolled his eyes and said, "For my sins." Janos Slint came to him 2 days later with a red nose and a greasy pride and refused orders the way a pig refuses a leash. The yard was bare that morning, the sky low enough to reach and brush with a glove. Men lined the walls to watch. John gave the order once. The man would not obey. He gave it again with space in it to save face. The man laughed. It sounded like the clink of cheap coin. John felt his father's presence the way he felt the wall behind him. Not a ghost so much as a weight, not a hand on his shoulder so much as a straightening of the spine he already had. They brought the block. Janos went to his knees in the slush at last, pale and angry and remembering how a man begs. John did not let him finish. The sword rose. Longclaw fell. There was a moment, a particular human moment, when the world has nothing in it but the small sound a head makes when it leaves a body. That sound did not get easier for being repeated. John did not want it to. He let the silence after it settle, and when the first mutter started he said, "There is no pride in this. There is only peace. We are quiet because we do not take pleasure in a thing that should sicken us." And then he walked away because that was the only way to prove he meant it. There were challenges enough to fill the days like snow fills the air. Brawls at the mess line, a stabbing that left a boy bleeding out in shadow, a pot of stew gone to maggots, and a cook who insisted it was still good, a giant who did not comprehend why lifting a gate like a toy frightened men, a queen whose idea of charity was salted by the vinegar of righteousness, a red woman who came uninvited to council and watched the steam of men's breath as if she could read futures in it. In the night John woke from dreams of the yard and Mance's eyes, awake and old and not surprised, and lay in his bed listening to the wall breathe like a great animal lying down. In the second week of his command, a message arrived on weak, wobbly legs from the east, where the sea gnawed the shore. It had been written by a hard hand and carried by a boy with more courage than sense. The words were simple and sobering: hard home, boats, cold, death, thousands. Hard home had been a rumor in the hall, fishwives' gossip from the shivering sea made into a shape men could hold and worry. Once it had been a place men went to catch fish that tasted of iron and weed, with a cliff that wore the scars of old worse work. Now it was a place where camps grew like lichens and hunger ate song, and beyond it the white world waited, patient as land under snow for a spring that would never come. He sent for Cotter Pike, and the man came smelling of salt and smoke. "You'll take boats?" John asked. "I'll take oars and fools enough to pull them," Pike said. "The wind's no friend to us these days. I've men who've rowed into worse." He scratched his jaw where stubble had turned his skin red. "This is your plan, Lord Commander? Bring wildlings in their thousands through your gate and break bread with the men who burned your brothers' homes and cut their throats and laughed while doing it. My plan is to put living bodies between the others and the lands south of the wall," John said. "If those bodies used to be our foes, they won't be for long when the cold shows its teeth." Pike studied him a long moment. "You've the look of a boy told by his father to hold a bridge. But your father's not here." "My father is dead," John said. "But he taught me to hold a bridge if it needed holding. The name for the bridge doesn't matter." He did not say the other thing, that his father had also taught him to take a head when a head needed taking, and that lesson lay like a fresh-cut stone in his belly, heavier than any meal. Pike spat, nodding. "Aye then, I'll take your boats. And if the dead won't let me land, I'll give them oars to chew." Val took her own kind of message to the wild, fur-bound and bright-eyed, and returned with Tormund at her stirrup, alive and belly-shaking and solemn in the same breath. "You cut him clean," the big man said again when they embraced in the yard, and this time he clapped John on the back hard enough to bruise. "He would have liked that you kept your word. He was stubborn that way. I'll bring what's left of my folk to your gate, but I won't answer to your king." "You'll answer to the wall," John said, and Tormund threw back his head and barked. "The wall!" He roared so that men on the steps lifted their heads. "A new king, is it? If it is, it's a tall one, and made of old ice. I'll take it over the Red Woman's god. He doesn't do much in the way of warming a man's feet." "Bring your people," John said. "I'll put them wherever men can live." "Some won't bend," Tormund warned. "Some would rather break, just to be seen doing it." "Let them go north," John said. "We won't chain them south. If they want the kinder, they can have the kinder. I won't feed men who won't be fed." They made a strange procession when they moved through the gates. Giants stooping like old men entering a small cottage, skin changers with their big, gentle hounds, ragged girls with knives hidden in their hair, a boy who had lost 2 toes and beat time for himself by clicking rocks in his hands. Brothers of the watch kept pace with bowed heads and careful feet, learning to be still where pride wanted to kick. It was work that ate a man's time to the bone. He did it anyway. The Red Woman came to him again when the frost stood like teeth on the pines and the night found every crack around a window. "You would protect the child," she said, no question at all, her eyes burning with a warmth that did not touch her skin. "I would," John said. "He bears a mark," she said, "not of the cold king. He is only man. But his father wore a crown men sang of, and men believe in songs until they are dead. That kind of belief bleeds well." "It is not yours to take," John said, "and it is not mine to give." Her head tilted. "Do you think I come to ask? I come to warn." The queen looks at the babe and sees the smoke rise at last. It is an old hunger in her. It is not easily denied. She has a daughter, John said, steady. She will not wish another child thrown on the coals in the name of a cause, however sweet. Do you know Queens? Melisandre asked, gentle now. Ido. She leaned in, her breath warm in the cold air. Send him away. Hide him in a cloak of honest lies. I do not wish the fire to eat him any more than you do. But the fire is patient. It will find him if he is here. The thing about listening to people you mistrusted was that sometimes they brought you your own thoughts wrapped in different words. John went to Sam. I can't, Sam said at first, eyes big as plates. I can't take a babe, John. I can't even keep my hands steady when I'm cold, and I'm always cold. You'll be warmer in the south, John said gently. Old Town needs a new maester, and the watch needs you to learn. Maester Eamon will not see another winter here without dying. This wind will carry him away like the ash of an old letter. There's a ship at Eastwatch. Take Gilly. Take the child. Take them to where the red woman's eyes are only words on wind. If you love them, you'll go. Sam swallowed. He looked at his hands as if they were someone else's that had failed him. I do love them, he whispered. His eyes filled and the tears spilled because Sam's tears were not fine wine, to be hoarded and sipped. They poured when they had to pour, like rain. I'll go. Gilly made no sound when he told her. Her face went slack and small, and then it set like clay that had been left too long in the sun. She went down to the pen where the goats were kept and sat with them for an hour, and when she came back she was ready to do whatever John asked and hate him for it like a good, kind woman will hate the man who makes her pick between breathing and singing. The switch was a quiet crime. It needed no cloak and dagger. It needed needle and thread and lies that tasted like bread and salt. He wrote the letter to Eastwatch himself, a script that would not be questioned because the votes had put the weight in his hand. He kissed Maester Eamon's brow and felt how cold the old man was getting, the cold creeping up his bones like ivy up a wall. He watched them go through the gate at dawn, a little group of lives bundled against the wind. A man who thought himself a coward and was not, a girl who had never been given a choice and had chosen anyway, an old man who had already seen more winters than any god had a right to give, a babe with no idea that all of this had been done for him. He watched until the east swallowed them. Then they stammered them like fevered dreams. The sound came from living throats, the cries of men who had always thought they would die with their boots on and were frightened to find that having boots did not keep a man upright. The grunt of Tormund's breath as he drove his axe into a thing that had been a father. John's own soft curse when Longclaw slid in and out, and it felt like cutting tough bread with a good knife. When they burned, their eyes popped like seeds. When they did not burn, they came again. They did not tire. There was no finish line for them to cross. They made a ring around an open space, as men had made a ring that day in the yard, and into that ring walked 3 figures on pale horses. The horses' breath did not show. Their hooves made no noise. The world around them turned to pane glass as they stepped, brittle and ready to break. The one in the center wore ice on his shoulders like a king's mantle, and what was not ice was bone, and what was not bone was the memory of a man. He looked at John the way men look at a wall and think about ladders. He came forward. John went to meet him because a man who stands at the wall and pretends he is not asked to go forward is a liar. The thing on the pale horse lifted a blade that was not iron. It steamed like the breath of an unhappy god. It moved with effortless, insulting grace. John parried once and almost lost his fingers for thinking it would be like men's work. The beast was something else, no heartbeat, no telltale. It did not breathe. It did not break its rhythm. It did not make mistakes. It only corrected John's mistakes and wrote them in a language he could read. When Longclaw met the blue steaming blade, it made a sound like a bell being submerged in deep water. John shifted his weight and made his feet move. Ser Roderick had been right. Corin had been right. Your feet are your next thought writ in muscle. He cut downward and to the left, a plain, honest cut. The walker, or the thing that had been a walker once in another story, took it on its blade and slee. Sliding again, and then John did something he had not planned to do and had not learned anywhere he could remember. He let the thing push him, gave the ground, turned and let his heel skid along the pebbles as if he had lost his balance and was a green boy losing a spar. The walker took the invitation. It stepped in, so close he could smell nothing at all from it. Not sweat, not cold, not existence. Longclaw came up under its guard and took its arm off at the elbow. The blue steam blade fell and did not hit the ground. It melted before it got there. The thing looked at him, puzzled, and that was the first human thing about it. He cut again, and this time the neck, and the head that came off made no sound at all when it went. The body fell forward like a coat draped over a chair and came apart like frozen mud. The air went colder in a way that stole a man's courage. John panted, not from pride but because air was suddenly alone the world was recalling. Tormund roared something foul and joyous. A dozen torches flared brighter as if a bellows had been pressed. The other two riders twisted their heads toward themselves and then toward John and then turned their horses and rode back into the fog with a speed that made mock of horseflesh. Around them, the dead still walked. They did not save everyone. He could say that plainly. He returned to Eastwatch with boats cracking in the surf from the weight of bodies and men rowing until their hands peeled and the bones of their wrists ground like millstones. He returned with faces he had never seen before and would never learn the names of. He returned and climbed down from the boat and had to walk in a careful circle because going straight felt like the wrong thing to do after watching such stubborn curves and loops of fate in the water. They stacked the rescued like cordwood on the shingle and counted them, and it was not many and it was more than none. Back at Castle Black the news went ahead of them like an old, slow rumor. Men looked at John differently now, the kind of look a man gives a cliff when he has fallen from another cliff and decided to walk on the beach. Bowen Marsh began to carry his anger as something quiet and polished instead of something loud and clumsy. Each day bled into the next and the board filled with small marks that were victories that looked nothing like victories. A child who had not coughed that morning. A quarrel settled before hands were set. A cook who did not water the beer. John did not take joy in any of it. He took a piece of bread and chewed it and swallowed and reached for the next thing, and he rubbed at the line on his cheek that Mance had left him and felt it like a tutor's tap. The letter came as the days leaned away from spring, and the wind came with a smell like something old waking. The seal was a bloody smear. The hand that had written it was mad or clever or both. It called him bastard and oathbreaker and promised him cousins in chains and a sister used up like a shoe. It said it had killed Stannis and worn his crown like a hat to piss in. It said it would come for John like a dog to the butcher's back door for scraps. It said fetch your girl, fetch the reek, fetch the queen's red woman, fetch the giant, fetch your fear, fetch yourself. He read it and did not nod. He read it again and felt the old north in it like the smell of peat in a house where the fire has burned too low. He called his officers and read it aloud. Men muttered. Men swore. Men looked at him to see what his mouth would do. I will not march, he said, and heard Bowen Marsh exhale like a hunter who had held his arrow too long. We cannot afford to leave the wall. If the letter lies, we ride into a trap. If it tells the truth, what waits at Winterfell will eat us and burp. Our work is here. We hold, no matter what words taunt us. We hold. If they come, we burn their dead for them. That's your sister, someone said. John had not said her name. He had not needed to. It was in the letter like a stain. She is not mine to save, John said, and the word mine cut him like bad bread. She is not anyone's to use. I will not have my men die for what my name wants. Winterfell is a word. The wall is a fact. Spoken like a coward, Alliser Thorne observed, but he chose a tone that could be read as compliment if one was looking for it. Spoken like a Lord Commander, John said, not with pride. If he had to wear the thing, he would wear it and not complain about the itch. Tormund, you will take those that can fight and stand watch with Ed at the Shadow Tower. The next time the dead come they might choose a different door. Cotter Pike, you'll shut Eastwatch and stock your cellars with twice the salt and twice the barley. Burn your boats if you must to heat your men. I won't have your oars in the hands of hands that don't feel heat. Everyone else, hold your posts. No rides. No heroics. Any man who rides away to answer a letter will answer to me when he returns. He thought it might be easier when it was said aloud. It was not. He slept badly. He dreamed of a yard in which men made a ring while two men made choices, and of a cliff against a sea that wanted everyone, and of a red woman's eyes unblinking in a wind that could not make them water, and of a small boy who did not cry while men argued over the name for his blood. In the morning he woke to the taste of old iron in his mouth and had to drink 3 cups of hot water before it went away. The knife came in the evening. Not a dozen knives, not a cry of for the watch stabbed in the back of his head as he went down. One knife, careful and quiet. Bowen Marsh brought it to him wrapped in a napkin as one might bring a man bread from his own table. He unwrapped it with a butcher's hands. His eyes were wet. John did not make the mistake of thinking Bowen wept for him. Bowen wept because that is what men do when the thing they call home begins to change shape and they cannot stop it. This was found beneath your chair, Bowen said and showed the knife. It was a rough thing. It had belonged to a hand that had not cut many throats. In the hall is not a crow's knife, wildling work. It was brought in with the rest, John said. He reached out and took the knife and felt the weight of it as if that could tell him a story. There are 3 dozen like it in the armory now. Bowen nodded, dabbing his eyes. Aye, that is the trouble of letting wolves into a sheepfold, isn't it? It's not their fault if they bite. He looked at John a long moment. It is the shepherd's. Do you want me dead? John asked, too tired for politeness. Bowen flinched. I want the old world back, he whispered. I want fewer choices. I want to stand in the yard and watch boys drill and complain about the cook and hate the cold and say I did enough. I want to be allowed to be small, and you are making me big. I do not like being big. I don't either, John said. He set the knife down on the table. You can try when you like, he added, and Bowen blinked above his wet cheeks. You can try to kill me. I won't make it easy. But if you succeed, you'll have to lead, and I think you know what that means. He leaned in and did not bother to be kind. It means forgiving yourself for letting people you hate survive because the world demands it. It means being called traitor by men too frightened to say coward. It means choosing steel one day and silence the next and teaching the men who watch you that both were right. If you can do all that after the first warm joy of my blood on your hands dies, then put the knife in my back and say for the watch loud enough to hear it echo. Bowen made a strangled sound. He wrapped the knife again and took it away and did not stab John that night. It did not make John safe. It made him weary. He went up to the top of the wall and stood where he always stood when he needed to be reminded of why men were trouble worth saving. The ice stretched away under him like a road without a destination. The forest beyond it was a dark ocean. The sky was white where it could not manage blue. He breathed in the air and let it hurt a little. Down below, men hammered, shouted, coughed. Somewhere a child laughed like a hiccup. Somewhere one yawned, and that sound was low and contented and made birds take off as if a rockslide had been moved where they were comfortable perching. Somewhere a pot boiled over. Val came to stand beside him. He did not hear her. He only knew she was there when the air changed shape around him. You did not go, she said. I did not, he said. Will you regret that? She asked. Yes, he said. Either way, that's what it is to lead. Regret either way. She nodded, as if he had said the answer she had expected and found it adequate. They stood together looking north, where the world had no edge and yet promised one if you walked far enough. You carry him with you, she said after a time. Eyes on the line where sky and ice pretended to meet. The man you cut, your ghost. I can see it in the way you hold your shoulders. I carry him, John admitted. He asked for something, and I gave it. And I keep seeing his mouth making the word good while his throat should have been making blood. That's a better ghost than most men have, Val said. Most men carry smaller spirits. What kind? John asked. The kind that whisper poor excuses, she said. Her breath made a small cloud that went into the air and was eaten. You gave him what he asked for. You thought you were simply being clean. You were being true. I don't like it. That doesn't mean I don't see it. They were quiet then. Below, the gate creaked like a cranky door opened by an old man. A runner clattered up the steps and bowed, panting. Lord Commander, he gasped. Horn, Eastwatch. 3 long blows. John felt the oldest part of him sit up. 3 blasts was not for raiders. 3 blasts was not for men who could be convinced to go home. How long? A day, the boy said. Ravens with the first light. 1 was caught by a hawk. The 2nd arrived straight. The 3rd broke its leg in the yard and still hopped here to die. I saw it. I buried it myself. He swallowed, and the motion was so human and small that it felt like a confession. My father kept pigeons once. Stupid birds. Brave sometimes. Sound the horn, John said. The words tasted of iron and salt. He didn't have to shout. The men around him were already moving. That was the thing about bad news. It carried itself. The horn's shape was water he had swallowed once as a child and never forgot. Big and low and broader than the breath of one man. It made the wall vibrate. The sound ran along the ice to Eastwatch and Shadow Tower and into the ears of men who would not live to hear it again and did not know that and went to their posts anyway, because an order is an order and the work of men is to face the things that will end them long enough to do a little good first. On the yard, men made fire. They made it neat. They made stacks of wood where men could reach it, piles of oil where hands remembered how to throw. They fetched dragon glass from the crates as if it were jewelry that would have to be broken to be worn. Tormund strapped his axe to his back and took up a spear. "If I die," he said, cheerful as an insult, "I'll come back and eat your toes. You're too serious to use them all." "If you die," John said, "I'll cut your head off. I won't have you staring at my toes." The giants gathered near the gate where their size would be stone rather than snare. The queen's men, thin, earnest, hard, filed into their positions with a rigidity that would make them snap rather than bend. Melisandre went to the top of the wall, and when John saw her there, small as a cut on a white page, he did not ask her to come down. If her god saw anything worth seeing, he wanted the sight as much as any selfish man wanted a peek at his neighbor's crop. Celis walked in the RD with her daughter, and her face looked carved out of something that would not gild. "The Lord will see us," she said, but it was as if she spoke to the wind. He took his place. He said nothing brave because words like that rusted too fast. When the dead came, they did not come like a wave. That would have been a mercy. They came like a slow tide that refused to admit it climbed, and by the time a man saw that the hems of his trousers were wet, the next inch was inevitable. They moved out of the tree line that had looked like a border for hundreds of years and then did not. They poured up to the ditch and fell in and burned and climbed over the bodies of the ones who burned and fell in too and did not scream because screaming was a craft for warm throats. They were dogged. They were petty. They were, in short, the kind of opponent Winter always was. Not noble, not grand, just patient and yes, victorious often enough that men called it noble because men are fools for any enemy that beats them at the long games. They held. For hours they held. At noon, a piece of the wall walk collapsed under 3 men too heavy where they had no right to be heavy, and the men fell and one of them broke his neck, and John did not let it take a piece of him because he had no pieces to spare. Val stood on the gatehouse with a bow and shot at things that did not stop and then set her bow down and fetched oil when a man called for it and then stood again, and John thought of a night in the yard where a man had asked to die one way instead of another and he had said yes. At dusk something big moved in the treeline. It did not roar. It did not stamp. Came on cat-soft feet for a thing with feet like trees. It was a bear made of something less than flesh but more than rumor. Its fur frost, its eyes black holes. It hit the fire trench and kept coming, much of it on fire by the time it reached the gate. One went to meet it. The giant's hand closed around its skull and crushed it as you might crush a cup. Fire went everywhere. One stood in it and did not seem to notice. His hair burned and his beard burned and the fronts of his legs burned and he swung his arms like windmills and knocked 24 dead men to pieces, and then someone with a bucket reached his knees and dumped water on him and the steam went up like a prayer. Night. They lit more torches. The torches burned and burned down and burned again. John's arms were stone. His lungs were a litter of thorns. His cheek itched where a line of scar pulled when he moved, and that itch anchored him more than any shout. The horns blew as needed, long and low and short and bright and in patterns that meant to the men who had learned them enough to move their feet where they had to go. Eastwatch answered. Shadow Tower answered. For a time the night looked stitched together by sound. Near midnight, the cold changed. It sharpened into something like taste. The dead stopped on the field of fire as if they had all heard a bell ring in a hall none of the living could see. They shifted. They parted. 3 figures rode forward on pale horses, their eyes hollows cut in clear ice. John felt the old fear, the clean, respect kind of fear that a man might feel before a king if he had been taught to fear kings. The rest was noise. This was focus. He lifted Longclaw. He stepped forward on the wall walk so he could be seen. The figures looked up. The one in the center raised a hand that was a piece of winter given edge, pointed at John. It did not gesture to anyone else. The wall groaned, an old beast turning in its sleep. The torches along the top guttered as if embarrassed to have ever thought themselves bright. Men beside John cursed. Someone laughed because someone always does that when his head sees the wall where it will crack and cannot not laugh. John did not wait. He ran along the wall to the nearest winch. "Open," he told the men there. "Open and let me down." "Aye, Lord Commander." One began, and another shaking said, we can't. "Open," John said, and they opened, because orders are the only raft some men have, and he would not take it from them just to make himself feel braver. Tormund met him at the base with 4 men at his back who had decided their fear would take a number and stand in line. John mounted a horse that had no love for him and less for the cold and went out through that same gate where he had once watched Mance's ashes drift like a weary snow. They rode onto the field and up through a path that had been carved by burning and by one's temper. The dead made space for them. That was the worst of it. Not their hunger, not their silence, their manners. They stopped a dozen yards in front of the riders. John could see nothing of faces. There was nothing to see. There was only an absence. He thought of the fight on the shingle and the silly human puzzle on the thing's face when Longclaw had cut what should not be cut. He thought of Mance saying good and how a man at the end could weigh the whole of a life in 1 syllable. "Come then," John said. It was not bravado. It was weary permission. "Let's do the part where blades speak so the men can go back to being afraid after." The center rider dismounted as easily as a father stepping down from a wagon. His feet made no imprint. He lifted a sword that was not a sword and breathed out air that had never been in lungs. John stepped in with his left foot and cut, and the blade met cold and did not shatter. He forgot the angles he had drilled because this was a new geometry. He fought like a man learning a house in the dark. Hand over hand on railings he could not see until they were under his palm. He took a cut on his glove and the glove went to pieces and his fingers went numb. He stepped back and the thing stepped forward and he stepped forward and the thing did not step back. And the dance that is very old played a tune it had always played even if the players were different. He did not remember deciding to do it. He did it anyway. He let the thing's blade pass by his shoulder so close it took a piece of fur from his cloak and a piece of something underneath, too. He took the hurt into himself because that was the only way to bring his sword to the place where the thing's neck would be if the thing were a man. Longclaw bit. The thing's head left its body and did not hit the ground. It turned to a spray of ice and a suggestion of shape, and the suggestion of shape went out like a candle pinched between 2 fingers. The 2 others sat their horses and did not move. Snow fell. That was new. It had been falling all night. It had just been falling too quietly to notice. They did not win. That is not how such nights end. They persisted until the dead stopped and turned away as if called to supper, and they sagged where they stood and panted like old dogs. And someone made a joke so that the world would know it could be joked about again, and the men did not cheer because they wanted not to waste their breath. That was victory enough. They burned and burned and burned. They slept in turns as if they trusted each other. In the morning Stannis sent for John and told him nothing useful about the war in the south and asked for more wood and more wildling men for a march he meant to make as soon as the world would let him. And John nodded and said yes and meant perhaps, and the day wore shoes again and walked as it always walked. Step, step, step until night caught it by the ankle. When he went to bed that night, he dreamed of Mance as he had stood in the yard, bound but not bowed, and of the word good falling out of his mouth with his blood, and of a small boy being named by a man with a gentle voice in a city of towers, and of a red woman warming her hands at a fire that did not warm her. He dreamed of the wall speaking in the language of ice, a sentence that meant hold and another that meant break, and the space between them where a man had to live, where his vow made a narrow bridge and his feet had to find it over and over. When he woke, the world had not ended. The world does not often end. Keeps bending and asking men to bend with it. He washed his face in water that made his teeth hurt and went down into the yard and found Ed already there listing things they needed and what they would use instead when they did not get them. Men were moving. Men were eating and spitting and arguing and shouldering load after load, because even at the end of the world, porridge had to be made and latrines had to be dug. John took his ledger and wrote good beside a dozen small entries that did not deserve the word, and then wrote it once more without any entry at all, because there are days when a man has to put down the thing he wishes the world would say, if only to keep his hand in practice. Val walked past him with her hair caught back, her bow unstrung, her expression as if she had just remembered a song and did not know if she wanted to sing it or cook it or give it away. She touched the scar on his cheek the way she had that first night, and this time did not say cruel or kind. She said nothing at all. It was the right size for mourning. Tormund lumbered over and slapped his back. "You looked them in the holes they use for eyes and didn't piss yourself," he said. "I'll make a crow of you yet." "I already am one," John said. Tormund squinted at the wall and left a silence there, as if he might come back later and hang something on it. He said. "You are. And something else, too." He grinned. "We'll find a word." "You'll make it rude," John said. "As it should be," Tormund said, and wandered off to shout at a man twice as old as he that his knot was a disgrace to knots. John stood in the yard and breathed the cold that men had turned into a place to live. He thought of promises made in a yard and promises kept at a gate and promises that had to be kept every time a man inhaled. He thought of the knife Bowen Marsh had not used and of the ones that would surely be used another day when fear had had time to put on better shoes. He thought of the South where letters were traps and of the North where no letter was needed to summon doom. He thought of his sword and his scar and his sullen heart, and he made himself imagine a future where a child laughed through winter and did not know why that was a remarkable thing. He set that image like a candle in his skull to see by. Then he went about the work.